Well, this is a World War I AEF Doughboy loadout. This was used in 1918 from November of 1917 all the way to the next November 1918. To start out with, this is the Brodie helmet. This was given to the U.S. Army by the British that had used it throughout the entirety of the war. The helmet is steel and just has a leather liner with a canvas strap. Next, my tunic. This is a 1912 tunic. This is what they used all the way until the beginning of the Second World War, when they started to use field jackets, but this was the more formal, and it kind of represented the past, the U.S. history, and the tradition of the U.S. military that was still being represented strongly in the First World War. Next, this is the entirety of the harness used. This is a 1912 harness. This is used to hold up the ammunition belt, which they would store 5 rounds of about 30-06 for either Enfield 1917 rifles or Springfield 1903 A1 rifles. This is a 1908 first aid kit. They could put bandages in here, Sorettas with morphine, and generally, if there was not enough medical supplies, they would just use this for overall storage. This is just a general leather holster used in the Second World War and the First World War. They would generally use this to store the Colt M1911 A1s, the 1917 revolvers, and occasionally the Webley revolvers imported by the British. This is a 1910 canteen holder with a 1910 canteen. The canteen was made of aluminum and had a metal chain connecting the cap to the canteen. Over here is a infantry bayonet. This was fitted to a 1917 Enfield rifles and Springfield rifles. It has the trademarks of the AEF, standing for American Expeditionary Force, by 1918 on it. For airsoft, I use a rubber bayonet, just for looks, just to make the loadout seem a bit more realistic and authentic. These are awesome rubber knives for reenactors. You can get them at the field works. They make all sorts of replicas of knives and grenades and props for extraordinarily cheap. Okay, so next is the gas mask bag, or commonly referred to as the musset bag. They would use this to store their gas masks and rations and anything that they found useful. I wear it to my side when I'm airsofting, but you can generally see them wearing it around their neck because it was easier to get their gas mask on in the event of a gas attack. So the pants that I'm wearing, these are 1917 breeches. The color's a bit off, but they're still the correct breeches that the AEF Doughboys wore. With the breeches, these are leather riding boots. These were worn by officers and infantrymen who were lucky enough to get them, who didn't want to wear the puttees or the leggings because they became extraordinarily difficult to take off if you got a twig or rock in your boot. You see the majority of the Doughboys in their pictures wearing the puttees with the 1908 Pershing boots, but the leather riding boots are just going to be easier to wear, and they're not going to be too rough on your feet. And it'll still be authentic to wear them and historically accurate. Okay, so this is a Nagant revolver. Generally, the Doughboys would not be using Russian revolvers. However, they were imported by the British, so it would be possible that officers would carry revolvers like these. They would generally carry the 1917 revolvers and the 1911 A1 pistols, but this is a great revolver. It looks very nice and it complements the historic aspect of the loadout quite well. It's CO2 operated. You just put the CO2 in there and you screw in the lanyard ring. It shoots at about 350 FPS with about 0.2 gram BBs. It's double action and single action. You can cock it back and fire it each time, or you can continuously fire on semi-automatic. So, as you can see, this is the ICS M1 Garand. And this was not used in the First World War. This was used in the Second World War, the Korean War, and even on to the Vietnam War. I use this for my World War I loadout because it's just a much more skirmishable weapon. I have purchased the G&G GM 1903A3 to fully complete the authenticity of the loadout. However, it is not the most skirmishable rifle. I do recommend it for shooting, but it just has a long way to go before it can really be a useful weapon while playing airsoft. You can buy this gun on pretty much any major airsoft website. It's AEG. You have clips within the gun that hold 42 rounds. On the gun, I have a 1918 leather sling. These would be used on Enfield rifles and Springfield rifles. I recommend these a lot. This is the most durable sling I've ever had. It even has the markings on it from the Rock Island Arsenal from 1918.
How have you liked it in an airsoft game, and what's it shooting at?
It's shooting at an average of about 380 FPS. I recommend it quite a bit. You can get a lot of good range on this. Of course, you're not going to be going automatic. This is a semi-automatic weapon only, but you're definitely going to be able to look authentic, be a valuable player to your team, and scare your airsoft opponents. To complement the authenticity of the loadout, I generally stick the bayonet on my gun. I just use a little elastic right there, and you just stick it onto the bayonet lug. You just put it on like that, and then it's you can just wrap it onto the front sight, and then it's really sturdy. It looks pretty cool. Doughboys, when they were in action, they were generally in a charge, and they would always have their bayonets on just in case you get into close quarters combat. In airsoft, it is nice to have the option to just touch somebody out rather than shooting them point blank. The contribution of the U.S. Army into the First World War is overlooked quite a bit in American history. Though there were not massive battles that the French and the British fought, such as the Somme and Verdun, the U.S. were still heavily involved, and even the ratios of death in the time that the AEF was fighting in France was higher than that of the American Expeditionary Forces in the Second World War. The ratio of PTSD for soldiers was also higher in the First World War than that in the Second World War. This is just generally due to the effects of modern weaponry being used for the first time. I find it important to express the amount of lives and effort that the U.S. put into the First World War, and it should not be overlooked. Battles like the Argonne Forest and Belleau Wood actually helped turn the tide of the stalemate that was resulting by 1918 in France. So I mean, it's just it's a different loadout. It's a fun loadout. It's fun to look at yourself and to have other people ask you questions about the authenticity of all the gear, and then it's also, of course, a nice opportunity to educate people about the U.S. contribution in the First World War. I like to do squad-based tactics. Generally, I'm not really thinking about tactics too much. I, of course, like to win, but it's generally about just having fun and being outside and being able to kill a couple hours with your friends. With the World War I loadout, I'm always staying at long range, unless of course you do decide to stick to the bayonet for CQB. It makes it an easy loadout to use long range tactics, even though the loadout is just a pretty fun loadout to use.
This is authorized. You can see the logo from Thompson Arms. It's an authorized airsoft gun for the Tommy gun. I believe it's made by SEMA.
This is a replica Echo 1 of an M1918 BAR Browning automatic rifle, or formerly known as SLR self-loading rifle.